Hello, everyone. Today we have Chris, one of the co-founders of Incident.io. Chris, can you tell me a bit more about Incident?
Yes, so we are an incident management company. We sort of cover everything from on call and sort of ingesting all of your alerts through to like how you respond to incidents and how you communicate with your customers with things like status pages. So sort of think of it as like the end to end when stuff goes wrong, you turn to us and we would help you out.
Okay, I think that was a bit too humble because you're not just the a incident response company. Like you power, I think, Vercel, Etsy, Skyscanner, a few other major companies, right?
Quite a few other major companies, and a bunch we can't mention, unfortunately, because sadly, the bigger you go, the less likely people
Yeah.
are to let you talk about them, especially when we're holding sensitive incident data and stuff like that. But yeah, things are going pretty well. We're like three years old, about 80 people, split across London and New York.
Nice, nice. Okay, great. Well, great to have you today. Obviously, we're going to talk about incident response. I think that's a great topic for you. I want to actually. I know a lot has changed. I know actually, like one of the reasons like you guys are so successful is because things have been changing. So maybe you can share a bit more about that. Like, what's kind of like the new way of doing incident response versus kind of like the old way?
Yeah, great question. I think if you sort of rewind the clock, where incidents used to be sort of managed was that you'd have like a central ops team who are surrounded by dashboards, and when stuff goes wrong and there's a sea of red on those graphs, they would jump into action and they would declare things, and they would be the ones sort of figuring out what to do and all of that side of things. And like as I'm sure you're like well aware, like DevOps happened, and that kind of like central ops function kind of disappeared, and what was used to be run by like a central well-trained team doing incidents was now replaced by like essentially the people building the software, the people shipping the software, they're the people operating the software, and they're the people dealing with it when it goes wrong as well. And I think
Yeah.
that is probably like the biggest shift that we're sort of seeing is this push where a lot of companies are essentially going from a world where you have 8 people who are trained through to I have thousands of people and I want them all to be able to do this thing kind of well. And I think so without going into vendor pitch like that, that's one of the challenges you have there is the more scale you go to, the harder it is to do things consistently. And that tends to be the kind of area where we will slot in and help folks out.
Gotcha. So essentially, it used to be just a small amount of well-trained people, and now they're just like with scale of the amount of different people that are doing it, it actually like adds more difficulties, but also I guess brings a lot of opportunity for the organizations.
Yeah, I think that's it as well. I think the best organizations are recognizing that incidents aren't like those like one big event that happens like once a quarter. Like we have like a definition of an incident that we will talk to our customer base about, which is broadly like incidents are anything that takes you away from your planned work with a degree of urgency. So if it's urgent and reactive, we'd call it an incident, and that would be like big things like, oh, my entire database exploded and the entire site's down or my service is offline, through to there is a bug impacting a major customer and they can't do something and we need to jump on it. And so we're like, cool, we'll declare it as an incident, tag it with all the data that you want, treat it as sort of, that incident workflow so people will rally around and get things done. And the benefit of treating incidents like that and doing this for many more things is that you then have a ton of insight into your organization. So you start to get into a world where you're like, oh, great. Well, like, which customers are having the most incidents? Like, have we got an issue when we get into a business review on a quarterly basis where we can go in and go, listen, you had these 5 things, but here's all the things we've done about it. And like, what follow up actions are we taking to try and reduce impact in future or prevent reoccurrence? And essentially what you start to build up is a very rich like view of your organization of stuff that was always going wrong, always
Yeah.
like pulling on people's like planned work time. And now you can see it. So it's like unveiling essentially a big sort of hidden dark amount of work happening inside
Yeah.
most organizations.
Okay, and I think also like it means that incident is no longer like a bad word, right? I mean, it's kind of like just part of the course. Like, yeah, we have multiple incidents, quarter or month or whatever, and I guess everyone is well trained as well now with incident response because when you treat even like smaller things as incidents, that's actually does that make sense? Like, is that
It,
what you're
literally, it's like you're singing from the hymn sheet. So it's like it's exactly that. It's like in a world where you go, my threshold for an incident is like here, like it's major things, right?
Yeah.
You essentially you deal with them infrequently. They're stressful because you deal with them infrequently. No one really knows or has the muscle memory to know how to deal with these things. And in a world where you lower that threshold, you say it's like all of these things can be treated as incidents. It's exactly as you say. You get all of the at bats, right? You get the reps in on the sort of low things. So when the big serious things come along, you are infinitely more prepared to be able to deal with those.
Yeah.
And that ultimately just means businesses are sort of like more resilient overall, basically.
Okay. I guess, so first of all, you get all that on-job training, and that's great. But if you feel like an engineer that's not used to it, right? You worked at a company. I think, for example, like Google and company and Facebook probably still have like massive ops team, and they don't have this distributed incident response, right?
Yeah, I mean, like the central this. I mean, this is the thing, right? It's not one or other, right? I think it is most organizations, and in fact, many of the organizations that we work with, they still have at some level a team that is very very trained at running a process. So, like, my background is in like running infrastructure and reliability teams, and immediately before starting this company, I was at a bank, right?
Yeah.
And we had at that point, like, you had all the engineers dealing with their sort of individual incidents for their services and things like that, but we still needed a central team who were like, when something really bad happened, you need
Yeah.
someone who's like, cool, well, I know that we need to pull on like the PR team or the comms team to deal with this
Yeah.
thing, or execs need briefing. And so it really is like not one or other. It's more like, give the sort of capability so everyone can run incidents, and then you sort of raise the level of like severity where you need to draft in, you know the sort of the heavy hitters, people who are very well trained at the process.
Yeah, okay. I think actually, you touched on a point. I wasn't even thinking about that. I was thinking just like engineers jumping and fixing bugs, but like it's actually PR teams as well that need to be involved with the incidents and all of those kind of things. So is that like part of the incident platform as well? Like you have those escalation into like business teams and stuff like that? Sorry, we're not going like vendor pitch, but like I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, no. It's like, I think, abstracting away from our software solutions specifically, like, I think this is again a bit of the cultural shift that we're seeing, which is the incidents are, historically they're like engineering things, whereas like, my server breaks or the database like dies, and I go and fix the thing. And I
Yeah.
think the best organizations realize that that is a very reductive view, and actually incidents are for everyone, right? So everyone needs to be able to declare an incident. Like, that is something that I think every healthy org should have, the sort of
Yeah.
big red button or the lever that you pull, which is like, I've seen something wrong or whatever else. That's like point one. But then point two is to resolve an incident. It very rarely stays within engineering, right? It's the first team that typically will get involved is some form of like customer facing team. So your
Yeah.
customer support team or whoever manages your status page, they'll be like, great, I need to relay something from this database incident out to customers, which means there's a translation layer there. Execs will often need to know, because if you're in a serious org, they might have press pressure on them, or they might just need to be briefed so they can sort of tell the board, and then it sort of spiders out from there. And so we see this, and like, previous to starting this company, like, as I said, I was at this bank, and we had many incidents a day, and it sounds scary, but they were like low threshold, but there
Yeah.
were people in customer support dealing with them. There were legal teams. There were execs who it was commonplace to have folks in that kind of world. And so, whilst our customer base today, mostly we are selling to engineers, right? They're the people who sort of understand the vocabulary of like what an incident is. But most of those places have broad adoption outside of engineering, and like Skyscan is probably the greatest example, where I think like 80% of their organization as a whole has used our product and interacted in incidents with Incident.io. So yeah, I think that's a sort of a new way of looking at things, for sure.
Okay. And if I'm an engineer though, and I'm kind of like being thrusted into this new world of just like having to take, I guess, more ownership of incidents and like being like reacting to incidents more often. I guess actually, first of all, more on the operational aspect of it, like how distracting is it to have like incidents all the time, or do you think, yeah, how do you think about that? Like, is it, yeah, good.
Yeah, no, I think it's like the thing to like internalize here is like, we're not telling people to have more incidents. So this work is already happening
Yeah.
most of the time, right? So you're not like, hey, declare more, break more stuff and have more incidents. You're like, hey, you're already getting dragged away from your work to do things. You're making those decisions implicitly, and always sort of suggesting in this new way is like, hey, if you track that and say that that is within the bounding box of an incident, then you get something back for free, which is data and insights that help you sort
Mm.
of steer your future team's work, right? So if I'm an engineer, right, a great example, like running a platform team, I get to a quarterly boundary and I'm like, right, we're going to plan what we do next quarter, and I'm like, if I was to like proactively invest in reliability, like where should I apply that effort? And like one way to do that is sort of consult engineers, and there's a lot of intuition that plays into this, but there's also, it's useful to have data as an input. And if I'm like, right, we're running an etcd cluster, and it keeps falling over, it keeps causing incidents, like how many incidents were caused by etcd and how much time aggregate did we spend as an engineering team on that, you can start to sort of like feed in as inputs to like your future work, like some of this stuff. So I think it is not distracting for engineers to have these incidents. I think if you deal with them well, it actually helps, because if I'm on a team and I see something going wrong and I go, oh hey, Tom's already on that. I can see he's declared an incident. I can essentially go, that's not my concern. That's being dealt with. Whereas previously I'd be like, has someone seen that? Is someone on top of that thing? Like, is it happening? I don't know. It's like, so I think yeah, that's how I would look at the world.
Okay. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I guess so. Okay. I'm an engineer. Going back to that, I'm already dealing with those incidents, whether I realize that or not. I'm actually jumping around, as you said. Like I'm not sure who's taking care of it. I'm actually thrusted into fixing that issue. But what else do I need? Like, do you have any advice for me to like become a better like part of the incident response team, or kind of like maybe even better manage my manage my time, maybe even, or maybe better document incidents. I don't know, anything that could help me as like someone that's not from the ops team, that's not traditionally have been dealing with those kind of things.
Yeah, I think like a few like very practical things, and like again, like setting aside any tooling or anything like that.
Yeah.
Like in the first case, if you're sort of bought into this, like I want to sort of get a bit more data on these incidents, like the first thing you can do is be like, right, well, I'm going to create a channel every time I see something go wrong, right? And it's a little bit cumbersome in Slack, and tooling does help and it makes it frictionless. But like you do that and then you leave a debug trail, right? So you basically just like act as if someone is like pairing with you on an incident, and you leave that debug trail in there, and that has like a number of benefits in that, like number one, folks who might be interested can learn from that, and that's ultimately what the goal is of like doing all this work with incidents, is like you kind of want to get to a world where you're sort of distributing expertise and knowledge across an organization, so you just get that stuff into the open. But also just like the practice of writing down your debug trail as you go so often, and it sort of blows my mind, but like it has that weird like rubber duck effect, right, where you sort of just like you're stuck on a coding problem and you just like you explain the problem to someone and you're like, oh, that's clearly how I fix this. And it's like you get that, I think, with incidents. And so basically it feels a little bit uncomfortable, and like I remember when I first started doing this, it's sort of like feels like it's a waste of time, right? It's like, oh, I'm going to run this command, or like my intuition says that like this node is like not in quorum or something, and you're like, well, I'll go and look at that, and you just leave the track, and suddenly you sort of get to the answers, everyone learns. But it also means if these things like blow up into much bigger incidents, you don't have to have that like, well, I've paged now these other teams and I've got to go and fill them in on everything. You go, hey, just read the channel to catch up, or even better, if you're using a product, right, give it like an AI summary, which is like a great way to actually use like LLMs. And all of that stuff just sort of, I guess, makes your life easier. So it's like, it's not, all of this stuff is like not do something that's sort of harder and like, you should do it. It's like, it's actually, it gives you the feedback cycle that makes things easier in the long run for you.
Actually, I mean, now you said, you mentioned LLMs, and I think first of all, LLMs are great for like summarizing those kind of like, like I see it with my note takers, like they do a great job summarizing conversations. But I guess also, and maybe this is just silly, like you can, instead of asking, me, the engineer on call that's like debugging stuff, another team member could just ask the LLM, like, hey, have we looked at, etc., whatever that is, and yeah, like, can I get that answer? Is that like too far from the capabilities of LLMs?
No, I think it's like well within the capability of LLMs. I think the risk you have there is no filtering, there's no middle person in the mix there, which sort of applies the level of like, is it accurate what they're giving back? So the way that we deal with this with Incident.io is essentially we will periodically in an incident, if we feel like the summary of the incident has changed given what we've seen being discussed and shared in a channel, we will essentially go, hey, it looks like this is the new update you should apply. Here is this outline of what the incident is about. And the person in the incident gets to go, oh, it's not quite right, I'll edit that before setting it. Or, oh, no, it's spot on, I'll just hit the button and it goes. And what that kind of gives you is this human in the loop mix there, right? Which means that someone can jump in and go, I can read the thing and I trust that someone has applied there. And I think the risk here is I jump into an incident, I go, hey, is this bad? And the LLM is like, hallucinates, is like, everything's fine, or like, this thing's broken. And like, you just have no filtering on that stuff. So we are firmly in the like, AI is there to accelerate humans, and I think it does a phenomenal job at summarization, pulling key bits of information out, exactly like you said with like conversations. We are less bullish right now on when incidents are broadly like something has gone wrong, you are already well off piste. Like LLMs that shouldn't, I don't think.
I didn't mean like, hey LLM, go look at my logs. I more meant like, hey LLM, look at like the summary of that channel. But I think that makes sense. I mean, hallucinations are just like too big of a risk.
Yeah. yeah, there's definitely product ways that you could make those amazing. Like, imagine a world where you jump into a channel, you ask a question, and what it does is it pings the incident lead and says, "Hey, I'm going to propose this as an answer for you. Are you happy it's accurate?" And they go, "Yep, it's fine." And then it pings the person. It's like there's definite ways to get there. It's just like we're a little bit like cautious. I think when you work with big organizations, you don't get many chances to be wrong. And I've used AI products. I mean, AI like linear regression probably behind the scenes in the past, and it's gone wrong, and I've been like, right, my confidence is eroded, and like this black box is something I don't trust anymore. So that's the attention.
Okay, cool. I mean, I guess like I have like one last question, which is kind of like post incident. So there was an incident. I did the whole like channel thing, summarized the whole incident. Incident is now solved. Any advice for post incident handling? Like, yeah.
Oh man, so much. This is something. So we have an entire team here who is dedicated to the post-incident experience. I think it's the area which gets the least focus in most organizations. And the default for most organizations is I'm going to go and write a document up because my risk and compliance team tell me I have to, and then I'll file it away, and no one reads it, no one cares. And I think like maybe it's like slightly spicy take, but like I don't think I've ever really seen people write really good incident reports. Maybe like a few cherry picked ones out of my past. I think what really matters is like running a really solid process and like having that sort of post incident. And there's like a threshold that you apply to this, right? You don't do this for every incident, but if you have a serious incident, making sure you make space for people to go and talk about it, to collect the perspectives of people, you make sure you distribute the learnings off the back of that so that they're not confined to the 8 or so people who might have been in the incident, but your whole Eng team talks about it. So presenting that back and then right through to all of the like, nuts and bolts of it, which is like, hey, if you're going to track actions off the back of incidents, like actually track them, right? And figure out which issue track they're in, but like have some central record where you can actually be like, are they getting done? That's the kind of stuff that's hard for organizations. So a ton of stuff that can be done there to make world better for people.
Okay, no, yeah, I think that makes sense. Because I think one of the hardest things, like as we said, like you solve the incident, but you want to make sure it doesn't happen again. Like this incident, if it's kind of like something systematic, right? It's going to happen again tomorrow and the day after and the day after. And like action items, I guess, are like one of the more important things. So it's good to know that this is. Do you do like, and this is more, I guess, your personal preference. Do you think it's better to kind of like have someone describe the incident on a call, so like in a post mortem, kind of like talk to the team verbally, or do you think just like sharing like a quick summary is like a better approach?
I think face-to-face getting people together is pretty much, for a serious thing, is pretty much the only way to really get the value from it. I think any world where you rely 100% async, I mean, you'll know this as busy people who are distracted by Slack and everything else, like the likelihood of people carving out time to go and deeply read and internalize those sorts of things. And also, it's so rare that people won't have questions, and the questions are where the learning happens and where sort of you tease at the edges of these things. So very supportive of for the right incidents, like not all incidents, but for the right incidents where it feels like there is a bunch of unknowns or it was complex or whatever else, it's well worth doing.
Okay, I think I have like one last silly question. So a typo in a dialogue somewhere, I mean, if there's something like that, we would fix it immediately. Like this is kind of like to go back to your definition of an incident. This is something we would call an incident. I mean, not officially. There won't be like an incident response team or report, but we're gonna want to fix it immediately. So I wonder, do you think that warrants, even like an incident on its own? Because like I mean, this is systematic, right? Like I mean, if one typo got in, surely there are others. So I don't know how you think about that one.
I think it's like a bit context dependent. I would say if it is A, urgent, so it needs to be fixed immediately, and B, reactive work, and you have a system in place that makes it very cheap and easy for you to declare it as an incident, I would declare it as an incident. We have lots of very minor things that we would declare as an incident, and so yeah, I think the cost of doing it is low and the upside is reasonable or non-zero, so worth doing.
Right. Cool. Is there anything else you want to add that we haven't covered? This was extremely illuminating, and I think I think anyone listening to this is probably more ready to like deal with incidents. But anything else we missed that you should have talked about?
I mean, there's a lot we've missed, but probably we've covered enough for now, for sure.
Okay. Well, Chris, I would love to have you another time and like do the second part of this. There's so much that we missed, but so far, thank you so much for joining us, and see ya. And anyone else?
Pleasure.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I said pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and people listening, please use Incident.io. It's a great tool. Actually, I don't think I told you that, but I think I posted it on Twitter. Like I was on a sales call at some point, and someone just stopped the sales call halfway and just said, "By the way, do you use Incident? It's like a great tool. You should really start using it." Like out of the blue. So yeah, people love what you've built. So just want to say that.
That's amazing. Well, we're also customers of Spix, so appreciate your product as well. It's powering parts of ours.
Yeah, no, well, thank you, Chris. Have a good one.
Cheers. Bye.